Hello and welcome to the Grandfather's Cave. In this video I'm going to run you through an adventure. You will find a link to all the maps, handouts and cards I use in this adventure in the description of this video. This adventure is designed for 5 characters of 4th level. Most encounters can easily be modified to make them harder or easier just by adding or subtracting one of the enemies from the encounters. This adventure is a classical competition or race. The characters compete with other adventuring teams and have a limited amount of time to complete their mission. As you can see on this diagram, I have not drawn an actual map. What I have done is to make a diagram of the various encounters that the player characters might face during the course of this adventure. This adventure is divided into stages. The first one is the crossing of a river. The second one are encounters in the deep forest. The third stage takes place in an eerie, haunted part of the forest. And the fourth and last stage is when the player characters reach the temple itself. Ideally, the player characters will complete one encounter in each of these stages. However, if the player characters fail an encounter, or if they are not interested in progressing to the next stage, they may move laterally in that stage to experience other encounters there. This I call going off trail. Every time the players decide to move laterally within a stage, it takes 1 hour. Likewise, moving vertically from one stage to another also requires 1 hour. The player characters have a total of 8 hours in which to complete this contest, and it's up to you as a GM to install a sense of urgency in your players. It preferably starts in a forest when the player characters are about to set up camp for the night. But before they reach an adequate campsite, they come upon a grisly murder scene. A group of human adventurers lie murdered in the forest floor, robbed of all their belongings and with visible cut and puncture wounds, but no weapons to indicate how they have been killed. A cursory search of the murder scene reveals that one of the victims clutches a piece of paper in his hand. Actually, this is a poem, and as the characters read it, they realize that the poem actually is a kind of invitation. The poem reveals that the contest takes place this very night, and therefore that there's a limited amount of time. After the poem has been read, a path appears in the forest floor, a path of luminescent toadstools and windflowers. This, of course, is to prod the players along this path so that they may start the actual adventure. In the Rendezvous area, the player characters don't just meet the 3 other teams competing for the prize, but they also meet the judge. The judge is seated at the head of a large banquet table. It is in fact a large feline resembling a panther. The judge greets the player characters, asks them to join in on the feast, and answers whatever questions the players might have. However, being late to the feast, the players have only limited time to ask their questions and to get to know the other 3 teams that they are competing against. The first is a team of halflings called the Flock of the Bailiwick. These are a group of burglars and cutpursers that were invited to this contest after they had successfully robbed a giant of his fortune. The second group is called Arndar's Wolves. These are dwarven mercenaries that were invited to the contest after rescuing the son of a famous nobleman in the area. And the third team are called the Andarithar, which is an elven name that means the Wind Callers. This is a group of disreputable warrior wizards who actually stole their invitation from another group of elves. However, the Andarithar will not reveal this or admit to any wrongdoings. The fourth and last team are of course the humans that lay murdered in the forests. And now, of course, they have been substituted by the player characters party. If questioned by the player characters, the judge may reveal the following: that the contest takes place every 100 years on the so-called Sprite night, that the contest ends when the sun rises, and that the player characters must reach an elven priestess called Clarion that awaits with their reward in a temple deep within the forest. Of course, there is more to this contest than the judge is willing to reveal at this point, but the player characters might be able to find some of these things out during the adventure. Exact details are up to you as GM to make up. What you need to know is that many hundred years ago, the priestess Clarion offended the goddess Demeter and was subsequently cursed. Demeter's curse forces Clarion to tend to a magical grove at the foot of Mount Olympus, where she labors away 100 years at a time. What offense brought upon her Demeter's curse has long been forgotten. But every 100 years, Clarion has a chance to break the curse. Every 100 years, Clarion sends her minions into the material world, where they recruit particularly ingenious adventurers to participate in the contest on the Sprite Night. On the Sprite Night itself, Clarion leaves the Olympian orchard and steps into her temple with a basket full of apples. Magical apples, of course. These apples are the prize the adventurers are competing for. Apples that will grant them fortitude and longevity. However, Clarion is afflicted with an insatiable hunger when on the material plane and starts eating all these apples, and there is only so much she can do to help herself. Thus Clarion will have eaten the last apple at the break of dawn, and therefore the contest ends. The faster a group of adventurers can reach the temple and claim their prize, the fewer apples Clarion will have eaten, and the players should therefore be careful not to waste too much time, because they might not be able to reach their final destination before the crack of dawn. As the priestess eats these apples, she becomes younger and younger, and when she eats the very last apple, she ceases to exist entirely and is reborn in the Olympian orchard to resume her work once again. The judge will not reveal any unnecessary information to the player characters, but particularly knowledgeable player characters might have heard some of these legends at some time. When you as a GM think the players have all the knowledge that they need in order to get the adventure started, reveal that the flock of the bailiwick has suddenly disappeared. Everyone will know that the halflings have gotten a head start and will therefore rush off into the night. When leaving the starting line towards the first stage, which is the river or the stream, the players will see two obvious paths forward. One is a game trail and another is an old ruined road. Some investigation prior to setting off might however reveal a hidden path. The hidden path leads the players to a shallow crossing. This is the safest place to cross the river, and the only danger here is the risk of falling into the water. If that happens, or alternately have those characters suffer minor non-lethal damage. I suggest you make those characters more vulnerable to fatigue during the entire adventure. If the players on the other hand choose for their characters to walk down the old ruined road, they reach a bridge. The bridge provides a safe crossing, but someone has rigged a trap here. If the characters do not detect a tripwire at the end of the bridge, they might be struck by a swinging log that hangs suspended out of sight behind nearby trees. The third option, the game trail, leads down to a watering hole. Inspection may reveal that animals have been attacked by predators in this place, and that crossing here might be dangerous. Actually, there are two large constrictor snakes lurking in the water, ready to attack the players if they venture across the stream at this location. When the characters have crossed the stream, they will be ready to start stage 2 of the adventure. As shown on the diagram, each of the locations where the player characters cross the stream offers 2 paths forward. In total, there are 3 paths forward into stage 2 that each connect to a different encounter area. Stage 2 is called the Deep Wood. This represents a very dense part of the forest, where the canopy is thick and where no light filters through. Player characters will therefore need sources of illumination in order to venture forth. The first location in stage 2 is Area 4, the Den of the Great Cats. This is a particularly overgrown part of the forest, and when the player characters enter here, they risk being ambushed by 2 large felines. These have the statistics of tigers, but are green with tan stripes. The next location is Area 5, the Ogre problem. This is a campsite where an ogre passing through the forest has decided to stay for the night. However, everything is not okay. While resting, the ogre has attracted the attention of 4 young Korred. While not very large, these small fae are actually quite powerful. The Korred have been drinking meat and wine and are therefore exceptionally drunk. While playful like most fae are, the Korred are actually mean drunks and are taking it out on the ogre. This ogre is both smarter and more peaceful than most of its kin. It does not want any trouble and knows that it is no match for the Korred. However, the ogre is not going to let the Korred chase it out into the forest in the middle of the night. It knows that it will for certain run into great danger if it does so. The ogre has exhausted its diplomatic skills and is now the victim of the Korred's bullying. This is a social encounter, not a combat encounter. If the player characters decide to attack the ogre, they will easily be able to dispatch it. The 4 young Korred, however, even though they are drunk, should be more than a match for the player characters. So you want to play this encounter up as a role-playing encounter. The last location in the Deepwood stage is the spider's Dell. In this area, a huge ogre spider has made its lair. It has filled the trees with cobwebs that would tangle and trap anyone trying to move through, and the spider itself is hidden in a large cavity underneath some toppled logs, out of sight for the player characters. If the player characters discover these webs, they will notice several large web sacks. The web sacks contain the remains of the spider's prey, and the spider has been fortunate this very evening. The spider is therefore not particularly hungry and will not pursue the characters if they leave this area. Should the player characters defeat the spider, they will however have the option to open the web sacks. Therein they will find the remains of the flock of the bailiwick, along with the skeletal remains of wildlife and other adventurers. Among the treasures found herein, the player characters may find green blood, which is a +1 goblin-bane dagger, as well as a circlet of the troubadour. The circlet of the troubadour is actually a circlet of persuasion that also has the power of a wand of hideous laughter. I have created cards for both the green blood dagger and the circlet of the troubadour, as well as a handout describing the hideous laughter spell, in case the player characters figure out how to use it. When the players have completed an encounter in stage 2, they will have to attempt a survival check in order to move forward to stage 3. This is an average survival check, which in my game is a difficulty class 10. Therefore, it should be possible for the player characters to move forward after one encounter. However, if they fail, they might be forced to go off trail and try another encounter in order to move forward. If the player characters make this survival check, they notice that there are tracks leading into the haunted part of the forest, but they also notice that one part of the forest seems particularly quiet and eerie. Depending on which path the player characters choose, they will move on to one of the encounters in stage 3. Since stage 3 is a particularly haunted and eerie part of the forest, they will each have to make a will save difficulty class 12 or become shaken. If you're playing with 5e rules, you might decide that as long as the player characters are in one of these areas, their characters will have disadvantage. The first location in this part of the forest is Area 7. When the player characters reach Area 7, they should already have some misgivings about one of the other groups, maybe suspecting them of killing the first human team that was supposed to compete, or maybe being the ones responsible for the trap at the bridge. Those suspicions are true, but not in the way the players think. If the players are suspicious of one particular competing team, that team is found murdered here. Just like the human team, they have been cut down without mercy, and there's no evidence to how they died. They all have stab and cutting wounds and been robbed of their possessions. If the players have no suspicions whatsoever of any of the other teams, the team they find murdered here are Anders wolves, the dwarven mercenaries. The other location in the haunted part of the forest is the burial ground. Just like the rest of this part of the forest, the trees here are dead or gnarly, but there are small wooden platforms in the branches of all the trees. And on these platforms rest the remains of dead elves and fae that once inhabited this forest. Most of the burial goods here are worthless or have decomposed to a degree where they are of no use to anyone. There's one exception, however, a master-crafted, finely carved spear. If the player characters disturb any of these graves, the one with a spear or any of the other ones, they will anger the spirits resting here, and 2 shadows will appear out of the trees and attack the player characters. When the player characters have completed an encounter in stage 3, make a survival check for them. If they pass it, they can move on to stage 4. Otherwise, they will have to go off trail again. In stage 4, the player characters discover the remains of an old overgrown road that leads up to a large temple. This temple is built in the style of the Parthenon temple. It's a classical Greek construction with stairs leading up to a large column entrance. In front of the temple there's a large plaza. The plaza is flanked with statues of ancient elven gods. In this adventure, the elven gods are actually the same as the gods in the Greek pantheon. And while the imagery is almost exactly the same as the one we know from our world, these gods have pointed ears and other elven features. The plaza leading up to the temple entrance is paved with enormous tiles that are 10 by 10 feet. These tiles are laid out in 7 rows of 7 tiles. Thus there are a total of 49 tiles, and the plaza itself measures 70 feet by 70 feet. In the far end of each of these rows of 7 tiles stands a statue of one of the gods. These gods alternate standing left, right, left. There are 7 statues in all. Each of the tiles bear the image of an animal, but only one of these animals corresponds to the statue at the end of the row. This is a puzzle that will challenge your player's knowledge of ancient Greek mythology. If your players have no knowledge of Greek mythology, they may be able to figure it out intuitively. Otherwise, try promoting an interesting discussion among your players and let them make some knowledge rolls now and then in order to give them some hints of what might be or might not be the right animal. In the cards, you can see that I have listed the 7 gods, and I have also listed the position of the animals in the different rows. The animals that I have highlighted with bold letters are of course the correct animals. The first row is the one closest to the players, and the 7th row is the one farthest away, closest to the temple. Thus the statues have been arranged in a hierarchical order, and that might as well be a hint to your players. If a character steps on a wrong tile, they will trigger a trap. The effect of the trap is described in the card next to the god corresponding to that row. As an example, the first god, the one closest to the player characters, is Dionysus. On his row from left to right, the animals depicted are the panther, a donkey, a bull, a rat, a butterfly, a fish, and a lizard. The right animal here is the panther. When players step on the panther tile, nothing happens. If they step on one of the other ones, they are struck with inebriation, and they must make a fortitude save DC 12 or lose 1d4 points of wisdom. On the opposite end of the scale, the last statue is the one of Zeus. Listed left from right, the animals on his row are the goose, the boar, the ram, the raven, the hare, the tortoise, and the eagle. The eagle here being the correct animal. If the player characters step on any of the other tiles, they must make a reflex save difficulty class 18 or take 7d6 points of electricity damage. As you can see, the traps become increasingly more deadly as the player characters get closer and closer to the temple, but hopefully they will be getting a hang on how to solve this puzzle. While the player characters have been trying to deal with the traps leading up to the temple, the last group have been lurking in the trees waiting for the player characters to do the work for them. As soon as the player characters have solved the trap, this other team moves out from cover. This team is the Andarithar, or the Skycallers, unless of course this is a team the player characters found dead in the haunted part of the forest. In that case, the team that meets them here are Arndar's wolves. The other team has as many characters remaining as there are player characters still standing. I have provided a card for the Andarithar and for Arndar's wolves. Consider all members of that team to have the same statistics. This team is very hard to negotiate with and will not back down from a fight. They are here for their reward, and they will not let the player characters stand in their way. As you can see, I have made cards that depict how these statues look. Remember that these statues are similar to the ones we know from old Greek culture, but make sure to describe that they also have elven features like pointed ears and maybe narrower frames. When the player characters enter the temple, they will see that there is a large temple hall with columns on both sides, and more statues in here depicting both gods that are the same as the ones outside, but also other minor gods that they have not seen before. In the far end of the hall there is a dais, and on top of that there's an altar. Sitting by the altar, they find a little girl. She's an elf and seems to be the equivalent of an 8-year-old human child. She seems to be playing chess with a blink dog. Behind her stands a unicorn that makes signs for the blink dog. These two magical creatures are obviously taking advantage of the child. The child, however, is not what she appears. She's actually an ancient elven priestess, and around her are the husks of multiple eaten apples. At her side stands a fine woven basket that still holds some apples. These apples are a reward for the characters that have come this far. The basket contains 1d6 apples plus 1 apple for each hour remaining until the sun rises. These apples will do nothing to remove hunger. The apples do, however, provide another benefit. A character eating one of these apples becomes 1 to 4 years younger, and their constitution increases by 1 point. While the longevity effect is cumulative, the constitution increase is not. Only 1 point of constitution can be gained, regardless of how many apples a character eats. These apples spoil like any normal apples would, and lose any magical properties within a fortnight. This was an original adventure designed by me. I hope you enjoyed the content of this video and will like and subscribe. If you have any comments on the content of the video, the adventure, or suggestions for future videos, please let me know. Until next time, keep slaying.